And welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Wednesday, May 25th. I'm your host for today's program, Paul DeMain. Many of the stories read here can always be found at our other website, IndianCountryNews.com. And here are some of the news stories from the day from the Associated Press and other Native news sources. Dr. Ann P. Lanier, Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium's senior epidemiology and health research consultant, was recently named a Carol Friedman Comprehensive Cancer Control Award winner. The award recognizes a true champion of comprehensive cancer control in Lanier, who is also a champion for the Alaska Native Tumor Registry. Dr. Lanier received the award at the National Comprehensive Cancer Control Program meeting in Atlanta, Georgia earlier this month. The award is named for Dr. Carol Friedman, who was CDC's first comprehensive cancer control branch chief. Dr. Friedman was a tireless advocate for the underserved. Dr. Friedman passed away unexpectedly in the summer of 2010. This year's Carol Friedman Award focused on the use of cancer data to inform people regarding cancer control by recognizing an individual who has effectively used data to drive comprehensive cancer control initiatives in state, tribal, territorial, and local populations. As Joplin, Missouri recovers from the single deadliest tornado since officials began keeping records in 1950, U.S. Representative Nick J. Hochul of Wyoming, top Democrat in the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, introduced bipartisan legislation that would solidify Indian country's tribal sovereignty during major disasters and emergency situations. Quote, "This has been a priority for Indian country for over a decade, and upon enactment will treat Indian tribes and nations as the sovereign governments that they are," said Hochul. As sovereign nations, Indian tribes should have a direct line to the federal government to expedite aid and assistance during an emergency or major disaster. Under current law, Indian tribes experience a disaster or emergency situation must rely upon a state governor to request the president for an emergency declaration, which triggers federal resources. Legislation introduced would amend the Robert T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act to authorize Indian tribes to directly request the president for such a declaration. Donald Del Lavador, Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Interior for Indian Affairs, recently addressed the United Nations on U.S. support for the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. He emphasized that President Obama holds the administration to a high standard of action on Native American issues. Lavador's remarks at the 10th session of the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues followed a statement at the opening session by Kimberly Teehee, Senior Policy Advisor for Native American Affairs in the Domestic Policy Council at the White House. Lavador's appearance represented the first time that an Interior official has spoken at this particular forum. Teehee, a member of the Cherokee Nation, and Lavador, a member of the Crow Nation, both emphasized President Obama's statement when he announced U.S. support for the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples on December 16, 2010, at the Second White House Tribal Nations Conference. Quote, "What matters far more than words, what matters far more than any resolution or declaration or actions to match these words," the president stressed in the December announcement. Lavador reaffirmed that the United States is committed to actions that provide meaningful improvement to the lives of Native Americans. A half dozen Mohawks and other tribal members with picks and shovels set up camp in a south corner of High Park earlier this month to restore what they contend are ancient burial grounds. Deep valleys and ramps cover the grounds, called Snake Mound by the natives, although it's been a BMX bike area for over 6 years. "We are prepared to stay as long as it takes to bring down these jumps," said Harrison Friesen, 39, a Cree from northern Alberta who lives now in Toronto. "We've been trying for 11 years to resolve this issue with the city," noting that city records detail bones removed from the area in site around 1922. The Teocoyon Historic Preservation Society has been negotiating with the city for years over this site, one of 56 ancient native burial mounds in High Park, said spokeswoman woman Lori Waters. Knowledge of the burial mound's place to line up with constellations has been passed down through oral traditions to the clan mothers of the Six Nations Reserve, according to Waters. The city has provided a concrete tool shed for the native workers, said Friedman. Once the land is restored, said Waters, the city even agreed to fence and replant the area. And today we finish up a part of a conversation with Shoshone Bannock columnist Mark Trahant with some additional updates that perhaps have a few Republicans worried. Welcome back to the Native News Update, Mark. We had a few internet problems yesterday, so we're going to try to keep the conversation going. Yesterday we talked a little bit about the presidential candidates, but today's news was the election of Kathy Hochul, a congressman in New York. Tell me what you know about that whole deal. A Republican, a strong, deep red Republican district is what they were calling it until today.
Well, in fact, it was Jack Kemp's old seat, former presidential candidate and long time, actually one of the most in the Republican Party, former quarterback, Jack Kemp. So it was a very red seat. The campaign became a big focus on Medicare and what sort of changes, and ideally the Ryan plan. And of course, in this case, voters pretty well sent a pretty clear message. It was a big, wide win.
Is this a warning to the Republicans about the next, 18 months to come here, running up into the presidential election? Is it kind of a flag that says, it might have overreached a little bit on this?
I think that's exactly right. And Senator Harry Reid, the majority leader in the Senate, is taking this to heart and immediately is going to call for a vote on the House bill to put Republican senators on record as voting for these Medicare cuts.
Well, that is certainly a political type of setup to force them to vote on their own proposal to show exactly where they are.
Yeah, put them on the record.
I was going to say, let's look at something else developing. Senator Herb Kohl of Wisconsin announced that he was going to resign last week. Yesterday's poll comes out, shows that Russ Feingold, the senator that was just defeated 2 years ago to Ron Thompson by about a 52% margin, would win a toss-up between him and the former governor of Wisconsin, moderate Republican Tommy Thompson, and that there doesn't seem to be anyone else developing on the Republican ticket that's willing to take this one on. Thompson was running at 42% in the poll yesterday, Feingold 52%. Another sign of the times?
I think so. This is going to be an interesting one. I was reading a lot of the conservative blogs yesterday to kind of get the temperature on that. And Tommy Thompson is not one of their favorites. And a lot of the Tea Party folks will have to hold their nose to vote for him, which could be interesting. A similar situation is developing in New Mexico, where former Congresswoman Heather Wilson, Republican nominee, and again, she's not a favorite with Tea Party folks.
And what about this rumor I'm hearing that Sarah Palin may be moving to Arizona? Is there anything to that at all? Is she moving to Sedona for the sweat lodges that are there?
No comment on that part of it, but I understand she has a house in the Phoenix area. It'll be really interesting to see what she does. There's a feature-length movie coming out soon about Sarah Palin, and if she chooses to run for president, that will be her vehicle, not any other traditional media.
That'll be interesting. Social media in some cases, movie media, personality, Don Trump, Ronald Reagan, Arthur Schwarzenegger, those kinds of personalities that got elected basically on name and face recognition kind of a thing rather than perhaps their positioning?
Yeah, it's a whole new era for that sort of thing. And especially with so many channels on television now, people can kind of have an all-time Sarah channel if they want. In fact, that could be doing very soon with an internet channel that's going to be all Glenn Beck all the time.
Yeah, wow, that's wonderful. issues. I was reading another thing saying that there's a lot of people out there that don't care about the deficit whatsoever at this particular point. They're saying if people don't start focusing on jobs, they're going to be turning out people on the right end of the left because jobs create tax income, which reduces the deficit. So quit worrying about the ceiling of the deficit and get into creating some jobs here finally. Does that seem to be a positioning that's Indian country is yearning for as well?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we stress that over and over because the type of budget cuts they're talking about would be catastrophic in Indian country. I was just looking here at my reservation here at Fort Hall, Idaho, and according to the census, which numbers tend to be low, the official unemployment rate is 19%. You start stripping government jobs out of that, you're easily looking at 30, 40, 50, 60, 70%, and it just has devastating consequences.
One last question before we leave you go. You're blurring up a little bit. The wind must be picking up somewhere between here and there. All kinds of tornadoes in southern United States. Is there any correlation between that and the fact that southern United States voted red last time around?
There's an interesting twist on that very question. Eric Cantor, the majority leader in the House, has said that any support for rebuilding from that latest hurricane must come out of new budget cuts. So who knows where they're going to lead with that.
We'll let you go for today, Mark. Thanks a lot for joining with us. We'll talk again soon. And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We want to say miigwech for joining with us here again today, and come back again soon.